Today I'm interviewing Jack Trimginham, who during the Second World War became a prisoner of war of the Japanese. He had enlisted into the 2nd 18th Battalion and arrived in Singapore in 1941, and on the 15th of February 1942, along with everybody else, he became a prisoner of the Japanese. But enough of these words from me. I'd like to take Jack's own story of his experience as a POW. Jack, first of all, thank you so much for the interview. This second time I've visited you, and I feel very privileged.
Thanks very much.
Maybe you could just tell us where you were born and your date of birth, and maybe whether that was the date you showed on your enlistment papers.
I was born on the 24th of March 1920, and I was born at 26 Merriweather.
In the city?
Merriweather.
Yeah.
And
what date did you enlisted?
enlisted on the 4th.
Of June 1940?
That's right, that's correct. 1940.
And what date did you show as your date of birth on that?
A year earlier than that. I
Yes.
said as in 1919, actually speaking.
Yeah, but in fact you were born in 1920.
I was back born in 1920.
Yeah. Now, can you tell me about what vessel you went to Singapore on, and roughly the date?
I went on the Queen Mary. We all sailed on that. The 18th were on A deck, and the date I'm just not certain about now. But we sailed the Mary, and we went across to Singapore. The trip was good, no excitement, and when we got to within distance of Singapore, we peeled off from the rest of the vessels.
From the convoy?
And then finished up on the docks for the disembarkation of the troops.
So once you arrived in Singapore, was your unit then deployed onto the Malayan mainland?
Yes, when we disembarked and everything was organised, we then went by train up to
Fort Dixon?
Fort Dixon, and we were encamped there in the Malay barracks, and we stayed there for quite a fair while. And the actual date I've forgotten, but we finished up at the Hague Lines in huts there, and when the time came, things were looking a bit the worse for wear. We went across to Mersing on the east coast, and we were camped there in Adap huts. It was quite hot, but quite pleasant in much respects, and we stayed there till actually things got a bit too hot, and they disbanded the camp and went into positions then back to Mersing proper on July State. We were dispersed there, and that was our first contact with the Japs at that stage.
Can I just ask you one little question? In that intervening period between your arrival and your contact with the Japanese, had the battalion done a lot of training?
They'd done a terrific lot of training in the jungle, at night also, at night training, by compass bearing, and learning the various things to look for. Would be taken out at night and then march so far forward, and then told to come back and find we'd stayed it off originally. There's a lot of training done like that, daylight training, dispersion of troops, one company against the other. The training was quite rigorous, was quite hot, which expected that. You absolutely spot them with perspiration, which never worried you. No, we did a lot of training, terrific amount of training, and jungle fighting, fighting not with a battalion but with company fighting, and splitting that into platoon negotiation with fighting. We were well versed in that.
Well trained, yeah. Thank you. Now, with the Japanese advance down the mainland, you would have been aware of the aircraft flying over and the aircraft going and bombing.
That's right.
Singapore Island.
Singapore Island, yes. and we used to watch them and count them
Yes.
as they went across, and we'd listened. They still had radios, and they just listened to the broadcast at night time from the lass that used to do the broadcasting, and even tell us our password for the night, and where we were stationed, and what we could look out for when the Japs caught up with us. We still thought that was quite hilarious, and till finally we were in positions as it was then, and I was stationed down on the beach with a section of men there, and one day out of the blue, one of the planes went down, Jap planes, and so a section from Don Company was sent out to find out what was going on, and they went heading along the coast towards Singapore, and where the plane was shot down, and they did pick up two Jap airmen there and put them back through. But apart from the planes with us, we only got one attack that I remember. We were stationed on the beachhead, and running down alongside the beach there was a definite track right through. Went down for a good mile or so, and the day before, a Jap plane, he was a spotter no doubt, old plane, not flying fast, and he flew right across along the coast and right across our positions. As a matter of fact, you could almost touch him, he was that low. And I think I finished up waving to him, and some of the other boys had a look at him. One chap in the guns further down, he was stationed there with a couple of chaps, or a few chaps there were manning I think it was they classified as an old French 75, and he had a brand gun. He took a pot shot at him, but he didn't wear anyone. But the next day, I think it was, we found out that he found something, because behind us was a troop of Don Company. They'd been there in position, and then I stood there on the parapet that morning, the next morning, and I watched three planes, and they were right up north from us. But I remember singing out to the chaps over in Don Company, watch out, they're going to come around, they're heading for easterly direction, but they'll circle around and they'll come and build the living daylights out of this place, which is exactly what they did. They come in formation, one ahead and one either side, and it's almost count when they're going to drop the bombs. And I think they're to hold 25 kilos each, plus their ammunition. And they came down, they dropped the four of them, the three lots dropped their bombs, no damage was done, and they went away. They never bothered us anymore. For some reason or other, thought we probably weren't worth worrying about. But that was the first instance of any bomb dropping we had.
Now, the Japanese, as they came down the Malayan mainland, and the Allied troops were being forced down towards the causeway, do you actually remember how you and your colleagues crossed the causeway onto Singapore Island?
After our action at Nursing, with the Japs there, we had to withdraw, and we went right back to, and we stayed on the northern, or the top side, the northern side of the island, and it wasn't until the next day that we went across, but the bridge had not been blown, so we went across the bridge onto Singapore Island, and I think the last people that went across that were the Gordon Highlanders. And it was then after they blew the bridge.
It was either Gordons or the Argylls, one of the Scottish
right,
regiments, yes.
And from then we went out and we were stationed on our positions on Singapore Island to meet the Japanese attack when they were to, which no doubt they would have and did do, to try and take over the island, which they did.
Yes. So you were down in the Bukatima area, were you?
Yeah, we went. I think we went back in memory serves me right to Bukatima, and then from there we were stationed out on the southern side, no, the western side of the causeway, and we were on a small island with 8 platoon on the adjoining island in the Singapore on the Straits. That's right, and we stayed there to meet the Jap attack. Then that's when we were bombed repeatedly and shelled for quite long periods of time until they made their final attack.
Now, when you engaged them in action, it was about this time, was it around the 15th of February when you were wounded, or was it slightly before it?
No, I'd say they came through, I think they started the attack on the 8th, and I think I might have been wounded on the 12th.
Yes.
And by that time though, they had got right through into company headquarters, battalion headquarters, and on the western side of us, big company of the 18th, they'd been pushed back. So flanking them, there'd be nothing left there of our battalion or the next battalion. They'd all been pushed back off the causeway. So we decided then to get back off the positions we were, and the lieutenant in charge decided to, rather than trying to get back to company headquarters, we had no hope of doing, to pursue his track further to the west along the edge of the causeway, more or less, to try and get round behind the Japs that way. But it was all to no avail. Every time we had to try to get through, we kept on losing men, and we couldn't find a break in the line to withdraw back through them. Some of them finally did, but when they did, we were separated from them by then, some of us. Quite a few of them then, they did get killed trying to break through the Japanese lines. But a lot of them did get back.
Now, once you were wounded, did you have a company medical orderly with you, or?
No company medical orderly. We carried in our haversack a little pack for affairs. There was a big bandage, besides a couple of small ones.
Yep.
And all I did was, when I got clear of things, was to take my boot off. Well, the boot was cut. In any case, it was cut right through and taken out the top. The laces were gone, and it's a definitely, from what I remember quite well. And it must have been a ricochet underneath my foot, which was my toes were on the ground, but the heel was not, because I was still coming up the hill, and to cut through. So I remember the boot came off, and I sat down, pulled my haversack off, and the first thing I looked for was to see that it had been so side of the foot. I thought, if I see blood spurting out, I know it's hit the gut, which I didn't. So I got the biggest bandage I could find and just stuffed it in the foot and wrapped it up. Then the boys came along to what was left, and they picked me up and helped me out of the position I was in.
Yeah. Where did you go back to then?
We never got very far because we still didn't get through. So we had 2 or 3 attempts at it, and we finally got through the lines, but not to go forward. We got out to the west coast, and from the west coast we went right down till we could look quite clearly onto the Sumatra, and there was an old British, been a garrison of troops there with everything in place. Who had been there first, I don't know, but it was from there we stayed till we could work out a way of getting back to Singapore, and we were on the water. So Roy and the boys had found there was quite a few boats around. We found one that would work, and they said, right, the next couple of 2 or 3 days after that, we decided to go down, join Day. By this time, we were pretty certain something had happened to Singapore. We had no contact with anyone, but there was no shelling going on, and everything was still. The air was full of oil, smoke was covered in you. You were covered in it, and we decided, well, there's something happened, so we decided to get back to Singapore, which we did, and we started that morning, and we sailed down to Singapore, to the base, the main town of Singapore. Instead of getting there, we got into Port Bookham, which was just off Singapore Island, and that was an oil depot. And it was from there, looking for food, which I couldn't find. I couldn't look, but the boys did. I think there were half a dozen of us there by then. And the boat, we found then, when they had tied the boat up, I was left on it, and we found then all of a sudden that someone had set fire to the oil. Net came around the tide, and Roy came down to pick me out of the boat and pulled me up. The boat was gone, so we had to look for another one then. And that afternoon, we decided to go back to Singapore itself, the main part of Singapore, and that's where we were taken prisoner. But it was by then the capitulation had been, and some of the people were already loaded up with trucks, and they were heading back to where they'd been told to go to Changi, the Changi area.
Out into the Changi area, and most